Welcome, everybody, to Apex Communications Network. As always, I'm Jan Almasy, but today I'm not actually your host. I'm just here as the special guest. Um, like the second tier special guest. We have an even more special guest that'll be coming on. Y'all already know me. I'm not really that important. But this episode segment series, if you guys have been paying attention, is a little bit different than the traditional Apex podcast episode, right? These episodes are less, they're still about ordinary people accomplishing extraordinary things, but there's a catch. They have to be somebody that is innovating a process, disrupting an industry, or actively being somebody that is knocking on the door of everything that is status quo in order to try to change a status quo. Right. So, in order to introduce properly the real idea of what this is supposed to be, I'm going to introduce the gentleman that is really the brain behind this entire idea, the disruptor himself, Mr. John Kundtz. John, welcome back to Apex.
Thank you, Jan. I appreciate it. I'm super excited to be here today. This is our, I guess, our third segment of the Disruptor series of Apex, of the Apex podcast. But it's the first time we're going to bring on a guest speaker or an interview to talk about sort of disruption within the industry. As we talked about on the first segment, in my mind, we're in a period of massive digital disruption, or even if you take it to a step further, experience disruption. And what I always like to say is, if you're in business or you're out there, you're either being disrupted or you are the disruptor. And what I mean by that is you're either Netflix or Blockbuster. You're either Airbnb or the hotel industry, or probably in a good analogy today, you're either the taxi cab industry or you are Uber or Lyft. And so I'm like super excited to bring in one of my colleagues in crime in the disruptor community. I shouldn't say in crime, because he's actually
going to say the people are going to crack up when they see the title of the guest.
Yeah, there you go. So, but like I said, I want to bring him in. It's a gentleman I've known since I've been in 7th grade. We went to middle school together. We went to high school together, and we've remained friends. And I really respect his approach, his openness, and he really is trying to be the disruptor in the judicial community. So with that, Jan, let's welcome my good friend Ray Headen, who is truly a disruptor.
Welcome to the party, Ray.
Welcome, man.
Good morning. Good morning. How are you guys?
I'm good, man. Just excited to be here. Excited to be doing stuff like this.
Most definitely.
So, why don't we start off with just how you and John met and what that was like at that time? Because we were talking about right before the mics came on. Maybe we should start something. If you guys are curious about what happens pre-episode, let me know, and maybe we can work something out to where you guys can see a little bit of the pre-mic action. But we were talking before we hit the mics that, when you guys met from the very beginning, it was a disruptive period. It was a disruption at that time. So why don't we explore that just a little bit?
Well, I guess I can take a start because in a way, the disruption was in essence the civil rights movement. It was the opportunity of an inner city kid from urban Glenville, Ohio, Cleveland area of Glenville, Ohio, where some of the riots occurred in the 1960s. I was there. I met Martin Luther King early on, but in 1972, as a result of really, I think, a disruption that occurred in racial integration, I was actually bused out to a university school, a prep school for boys, one of the best in the United States. And I am proud to be knowing John since I was 12 years old. And that was a disruptive event because it allowed for people to be friends and to know each other personally for years and years and years. I mean, when you think about it, that is totally what is making all the progress that we need to still make a lot of progress. But the progress that came in racial integration and the ability for us to be here talking to one another like we are was a result of like the leadership of people who saw that people like John and I needed to get together way back almost 50 years ago now. It's crazy.
Yeah, isn't it amazing? You know what, Ray? What always struck me, and I've been giving this a lot of thought. We, at least for me, you were a lot smarter than me, but I didn't know any better, right? A whole bunch of we were all sort of new kids, right? We all sort of came in together.
Yeah,
I didn't really know that, the difference between growing up in Shaker Heights versus growing up in Glenville, but which was great because it took away any implicit bias. We didn't have any implicit bias at the time, and we got to know each other for the people we were, not where we came from or where we grew up or who our parents were or any of that stuff. And I think and it was a good time for that, right? It was the fall. And now there was not a great time in the country, right? We were in the middle of the Vietnam War. There was certainly the racial tensions that had gone on in the late '60s, early '70s. But I think with you coming to university school, in middle school, us all just sort of being sort of dumb teenagers, if you will. We got to see each other for what they were, not for where they came from. And for me, was a huge one of the many pivotal moments in my disruptor life, if you will.
absolutely, absolutely. And when you think about it, that's sort of the whole point of America. I mean, in essence, that we all kind of like should be able to stand tall
Mhm.
with one another in unity and
Mhm.
of where you are, what your race is, your background, regardless of whether you got cash or no cash.
Right.
And literally, like I said, I give credit to the old white men of the 1960s and 70s, Roland McKinley and the Board of Trustees at US, to see that the future was integration, the future was diversity, the future was inclusion. All the things that we were talking about, those guys took a moment in time when things could have gone in either of two directions. There were riots, there was, like the war, there was a lot of disruption. And they chose to take a path that allowed for us to get to know each other and look at what's going on 50 years later. We are both
Mhm.
in the process of helping to disrupt other institutions, other places, so that like literally everything improves when you're disrupting.
Yeah, I definitely would agree with that. I think that, I mean, when you come into any type of arena that has been at a baseline for however long, I've always been curious as to why people don't use the word that I just used right there. Why? Why is it like this? Why does it have to be this way? Why are situations playing out the way that they are? I've always been one to never take something at like face value. And like you said, to the credit of those people that were on that board at that time doing the things that they were doing, they were asking why. Why is it like this? Why are we still doing this? Why are these kids not able to be together? And then here we are at this point where you and John have forged this friendship over years and years and years. That is, an epitomization of what they were hoping would happen at that period of time.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely, you hit it right on the button, Jan. It's the place. I like to say as a judge that I stand on the shoulders of a whole lot of people. Nobody gets to where they are without a lot of help. And that might be family, that might be institutions, it might be friends, it might be all kinds of different things. But it just doesn't happen by accident, and a lot of it is you too, individual matters. But in the absence of being able to rely upon other people, we're not going to be able to be successful, and the country won't be successful either.
Yeah.
I agree. And, it goes, we don't need to, we can move on in a second, but I do want to say, Ray, it sort of goes back to the motto of university school, right? Responsibility, loyalty, and consideration. And those words, I don't know, they were ingrained in us. And I think as you say, the old white men of the late '60s, early '70s also saw that, and they were able to give you and me. I had my challenges for sure, and you and I were given the ability to take advantage of that motto and move forward. And you made an amazing career out of it. I mean, I'm gonna tout you a little bit more. You know, after you went to university school, you went to Williams College, and a number of my friends went there. It was a place I would have never been able to get into out of high school. And then you went on to become a lawyer at the University of Pennsylvania. So I mean, you've got this sort of the three pedigree educational institutions. Came back to Cleveland, worked at one of the really nice law firms here in town, and obviously have taken on more responsibilities, and now are a judge, helping to disrupt, if you will, our legal system. So, I mean, you've got that's always been impressive to me as friends, as your ability to and take advantage of your hard work ethic. You're obviously you're smart, and you now are looking to give back to the community, even so much as being on the board of university schools. So to me, that's all sort of why I respect you, and why you're on this show today. So why don't we move on to some of the key points of what we want to have Ray talk about.
Well, if I could, just for a
Sure.
second, John, because I think I want to share something that you said so insightfully. Those quote unquote old white men saw that, that diversity and inclusion actually goes both ways. It's not just like letting a kid from Black Glenville coming out to US and only helping me, but it also helped you as well. And likewise, that's the whole point of this thing. If it doesn't go both ways, then you don't have that bridge of understanding, that bridge of connection that I think I've utilized in my judicial career, in my legal career, to the to the benefit and disruption of where things can improve. Because you got to have a diversity of thought and ideas and opinions and approaches and whatnot. And that's what we learned when we got together, John. And that's why you're the disruptor, and I am hopefully a disruptor, because like I think that was what was intended a long time ago.
I was a disruptor just because I was a troublemaker, but that's a different story. Um,
We'll
no,
have to
but
hear those stories at
you're
some point, John.
you're spot on, Ray. I mean, that's what I learned going out into college and into the professional world, and in my, and working for IBM for all of these years, is that people with different backgrounds, different socioeconomic upbringings, you name it, they all can have really good ideas. And the more ideas, and one of the things Jan and I have been working on is this whole idea of empathy and understanding what people think and how they feel and what they do and what they say, allows you to bring this whole, what we are today, this user-centric, disruptive user experience into the marketplace. And so that's really, I think you can probably trace it all the way back to 1972, so to speak. And now I am the old white guy, so this is sort of exciting.
How the tables turn, huh, John?
Yes. Right.
So in on that same vein, we're talking about how your guys' relationship formed, and the disruptive period that was that time period, right? And a lot of people have been comparing ever since really March, when COVID hit, that this entire planet has just done this, and everybody's kind of trying to figure out which way is up. But it's the perfect time to disrupt, right? I made the comparison the other day, and I really like it. Sometimes I'll like say things out loud, and I'm like, ooh, I like that. I'm gonna write that down. And I compared the entire world to like this snow globe, right? And when you have a snow globe, it can still be this beautiful thing, but a lot of times all of the dust kind of settles at the bottom. And every now and then you need a disruptor to come in and just do this to really get the beauty that's behind the curtain. It's all kind of settled at the bottom, everything's status quo. And if a disruptor is able to come in and shake things up, it really allows all of those beautiful, glittery snowflakes to re-enter the atmosphere. And then the world is in this beautiful, blissful renaissance for a short period of time until it settles again, and another disruptor is required to come in and shake things up. So as far as it comes to shaking things up in the judicial side of things, the legal entities that we've been talking about leading up to this, what exactly is going on in this 21st century. We've talked about, we're a big show that likes to talk about data. So I'm super excited for this part of the conversation. But why don't we start to hit on the database, and you can explain what that is and kind of explain how it came about.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jan. What's important is to put 2020 into a historical context of almost 25 years in the United States, but in particular where I'm sitting on the Court of Appeals in the state of Ohio, where judges have been parts of blue ribbon task forces. They've been part of many efforts that are looking at ways to increase fairness in the judicial system, ways to increase equal justice, ways to increase confidence in the judicial system. And a whole lot of that comes down to that old adage that how you treat your least is really reflective of the best of what your whole society is. And that's what the judicial system is about. And yet, when you look back on what I've been able to do, and this is the disruptive element, for 25 years, there have been all of these blue ribbon task force looking at whether or not there is a need for a criminal sentencing database. You would think in the 21st century that there's already that there's like a database that has all of the sentencing data that would allow for judges and the public to be able to look at issues like how long a sentence is or whatever the effects of equal justice are. The whole point is that we don't have information about individual felonies, about how felonies are sentenced across individuals. We don't know if there's racial bias or implicit bias. We don't know about how programs work, like diversion programs, community control, which is like when you're on the little ankle bracelet and other things like that. So these kind of things are fundamental to fairness because like if one person gets one sentence and another person gets entirely different sentence for the same crime, that's just simply not fair, and that's not the United States. So I got tired of that, and in the 2 years that I've been on the bench, not only have I had a 100% record as a judge, but I took on this issue head on along with a couple of Supreme Court justices, now the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, Ohio Supreme Court as well. And what we're going to do is we're going to enact a criminal sentencing statewide database so that many of these equal justice issues, fairness issues, will be part of it. And Ohio is a leader in the states in the United States on this issue. So my point being, why didn't it occur? Why didn't it occur? You had all of these task forces. You've had all of these people saying that there are blue ribbon panels across the country over 25 years. There's a critical need for data, that all said. The reason why I think it isn't, and this is where, again, coming back to where John and I are, I'm in a position because I went to a place like the U.S. to call it what it is. It's institutional racism. A lot of people say it doesn't exist, but when you have, it's that what institutional racism or bias is, it's that place where literally why isn't it occurring? Why isn't it occurring? 25 years of blue ribbon task. This is around the United States, John and John. Well, there must be a reason. And the only reason I can come up with is, well, it's institutional. It doesn't happen because judges or the public or everyone else just sort of lets things continue on. And that's what institutional bias, I think, is.
Yeah, I was flabbergasted on doing the research for this upcoming session regarding that this has been going on, if you will, since 1999, and that people have looked at this problem or this issue, and as you said, building a database is something that is pretty common and pretty easy these days, and so this is not a technical problem, but the fact that it's been a number of task forces, a number of commissions, for 25 years, and it just sits there, and the status quo wins out, right? And I think when the status quo wins out, that then, in my mind, reinforces whether it be institutional racism or implicit bias or whatever. But, one of the things I always talk about with my colleagues is you can't measure what you can't see, and you can't fix what you can't measure. And so I think you're really onto something as far as trying to at least just get the data in a place so you can see it. Then you can measure it. Once you measure it, then you can manage it and you can fix it. So, I mean, what you're trying to do, and that's what, again, why we wanted to have you on the show, is you clearly are in something that, should have been done, a decade or so ago. You were finally able to and I think, Jan, you're right. I think this idea of all these commissions, all these task force, they were the little flakes in the snow globe, and they've settled down to the bottom of the globe. And now Ray's coming in and he's shaking that globe up. The timing is, I think, really good. So, but I was very, like I said, back to my main point. I was sort of, I was surprised and disappointed, to be honest, that this has been going on for so long. So anyway, so thanks.
Yeah,
Yeah, and as you said, good data drives information, and I guess that's the point. I think doing my best as a judge to do the day-to-day things. But then always there needs to be somebody who is also not just doing the day-to-day things, but looking to see where there are places where there can be significant improvements. And I'm proud of the effort that I have led in Ohio to bring information uh, to the forefront, because it flows up and down through the entire justice system, as you just said, John. And uh, and I think that one of the things that is so important, the reason why I want to use words that might be inflammatory, is because there needs to be some inflammation right now, because it always seems to disappear. It doesn't seem to work. 25 years.
Can I pop in on that real quick? I want to try to hit on that word, because coming from somebody that is a ICU nurse first and foremost, and then kind of like a pseudo, I say I have my street degree in communication, right? But my actual degree was in nursing. So when you say the word inflammation, right, a lot of people associate inflammation with bad, right? Like you want to take anti-inflammatories, you want to take things. But the ironic thing is that inflammation is one of the first steps in the cascade of responses that your body has for protection. It's one of the first steps that your body undergoes. Like when you get stung by a bee, the entire reason why you start to get inflamed is because your body releases histamine,
Mm.
which is meant to try to protect body systems. Right. And we go off on these cool medical tangents every now and then when I think somebody uses a word that relates to some analogous thing that I can relate to in the medical field, because I do have a lot of medical staff that listen to the show. But as soon as you said that, it was the first thing you said, that we need, it's inflammation is required right now. Like we need to use a little bit of inflammatory stuff. A, because inflammation is uncomfortable, but
Absolutely.
also B, because the intention behind the inflammation is that of protection.
God bless you. Absolutely. And
So,
protecting the justice system is fundamental, especially in this year, 2020, because there's so many people who are losing confidence in our institutions. And as I've shared on many different occasions, the judicial system is not one where we have an army behind us or anything like that that can force people to do anything. No, people submit because they believe in our system and that justice is fair, and that and there's a need for that to be always reinforced. And so when we have opportunities like the criminal sentencing database to make people aware that they can be a part of something that transforms not just their lives, because it's, maybe they're not going to be involved with the criminal justice system, but like I said, it's about when we can do something to affect the system itself, that makes the entire system for all of us that much better. So that's what I'm most concerned about, most interested in, and most pleased with being on this program, because like you said, Jan, inflammation, using words like why did it not happen for 25 years, is that well, I'm going to call it. Like I said, I went to prep school. I've been in an Ivy League law. I mean, I hopefully want to be in a position to challenge both black, white, and any kind of race person to call stuff what it is in some ways. It may not be accurate, but at least it will begin the process of making the change, the disruption that's necessary to stop it now and make 2020 the time when across the United States, but particularly in Ohio, we begin a movement to get data for our felony sentences so that there can be measurement of inequality or measurement of equality. We just don't even know.
Hey, Ray, I want to move on to a concept that you brought up as part of the prep. And I really like this because I see this sort of concept happen all the time in my world, but I really didn't thought about it in your world. And you bring up this concept, and I think you've actually sort of coined it, this mass incarceration creep. And I'd love to have you spend a few minutes just talking about how you came up with that and the sort of why it is and I think because I think does then lead into what you're trying to do to fix the problem.
Yes, absolutely. There has been so much discussion in really the mass markets. I think at this point now of mass incarceration of African Americans is within the presidential election. Who started it? When? How? That there is areas where I think now at least one third of the African American males in the United States have some type of like relationship to the criminal justice system. They were either in jail, on parole, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And the question of data is fundamental in there, and it has only been coined by me because, like, this is new stuff, and hopefully it will add to the rubric of the solution to mass incarceration. Because mass incarceration is not holistic. It's made up of individual decisions by individual judges and individual prosecutors who charge people with crimes and maybe charge some people with one crime and charge them with another group with another crime. But without data, we just don't know how all of that is playing into whether and how there seems to be so much more impact in our communities of mass incarceration of poor black males, particularly, than other groups or other minority groups in proportion to the population. Obviously, there's the issue of who's guilty and who's not. That is absolutely going to always be the case. And also, no, I am not, and no one else in this movement is trying to take away the discretion of judges to sentence as they please, because like that is why they're elected. That is their job. So they are bound by our canons of ethics and by our duty as judges to sentence people for prison. So this is not a goody two shoes thing and letting violent criminals off. No, not at all. In fact, I'm totally against that. But the issue of whether or not mass incarceration creeps into our system because of lack of data is real. If somebody over here commits the same crime and gets 2 years, and another person who's African American or whatever gets 10 years, that extra 8 years, that's where the mass incarceration is. That's what I call the creep into the system of mass incarceration. It's the individual differences through the lack of data that sometimes judges just don't know. The prosecutors just don't know. The defense counsel just doesn't know because, like, literally, like all of those people can use data to influence whether or not there is like a disparate treatment and inequality in the system. And so that's what I'm hoping to have this database do is to take the lead on mass incarceration creep, stopping it, and like making this part of the rubric at universities and other places where I haven't seen it yet. It's mass incarceration creep.
It's an interesting point because I think one point I want to jump on or highlight it may not be intentional, right? People, these are good people trying to do good things, as you said. People, they, as my dad used to say, don't do the crime if you can't pay the time, right? When I used to get in trouble all the time. But anyway, um, so what I think you're saying, and the three elements that I starting to see that can bubble up that your initiative can solve is certainly fairness amongst everybody, whether regardless of and it can be fairness across geographies or fairness across social economic you know organization or people or just race in general. So there's certainly a racial equality or in there, but there's also a huge taxpayer implication, right? We all pay taxes in the state of Ohio, and if I can't if I can't use data to make good decisions, I probably am spending more money than I need to. So I see those 3 points really and they're related, but they're different, right? And that's sort of what I think I hear. This creep, unfortunately, makes us spend more money. We have no way of measuring. We can't even measure if we're fair or not. And it gives us the impression that, and probably the reality, that there's racial inequality throughout the system. And again, not necessarily by
Data.
design, but just because there's no data to make decisions.
Right. We don't have the data, so how do we really know? And literally, John, mass incarceration creep, as I call it, is expensive
It's
because
gotta
if we don't have the data, it's about $20,000 a year to imprison someone. That's the cost of a college education.
Mhm.
Beyond that, there's costs to, like, obviously society and to human beings. When, like, literally somebody over here gets, for the same crime, 3 or 5 years, the other person gets 15 to 20 for hopefully and again, we're talking about non-violent offenses, drugs, and again, a lot of it relates to consecutive sentences, and that's part of the process of measuring data, where like these crimes can be put back to back to back, and who gets consecutive sentences and who doesn't, and things of that nature. So all of those kind of measures lead to stretches of sentences that might be in need of research data. And it's not necessarily whether they're guilty or innocent. It's really more about the data to make sure that the process is truly fair. It's the creep that we're talking about, the differences between the sentences. Again, no one's trying to say that judges can't sentence with their own discretion, but if they don't have the data, maybe that creep is like non-intentional, as you said, John.
Yeah. So a couple of those points. I know everybody's gonna watch this and make fun of the fact. There's two things that they always point out. When my eyebrow goes up, they know that my brain is scheming, and then I'll have like these light bulb moments where I can't help but like I shake my head and look off into the distance. So everybody that has ever heard of Lean Six Sigma ever knows about the Swiss cheese effect, right? Where you have a whole bunch of pieces of Swiss cheese lined up in a row, and although they all have holes in them, if the holes are misaligned, that issues in processes won't be able to fall through the Swiss cheese. But those holes align, and then get things can pass through the gaps. And without data, you can't really figure out whether or not the holes are aligned or they're not aligned, or if they're just kind of like if it's just happenstance. And one thing that I thought was extremely interesting is, in the prep, we were talking about how the judicial system and the business world are like not reflective of each other as far as capabilities go. Over the past 25 years, we've been trying to come up with this database. So there's been these task forces. There's been all of these different things that have been trying to do this, and the pushback has always been, cost or tech or something along those lines. But you look at the business world, right, and we have real, not like collective tools, but real time tools that are able to monitor down to, I mean, the user click rate when it comes to how they're interacting with a site in real time. I mean, I can get really, really creepy with data. And which is a good thing, because if you can use that data ethically, then it really blows things wide open. I mean, you are able to garnish insights. I hate it when people use the word manipulate data. I want to manipulate the data to get a response. Like, no, you put out something, the data comes back, The data is what it is, and you gather insights from said data. That your job is not to manipulate it. Your job is to interpret that and to make sure that this is where it's sitting. This is how it is. But if you have these ability to measure and predict trends and showcase, here is how this has been over a period of time. I was dumbfounded that that didn't exist. Like you said in the beginning, why doesn't this exist? It seems like the public just assumes that that's something that would be out there, and it's really not. But with the tech that is we have today and all of the abilities that we have, there really is no reason that something like this shouldn't exist. Because I know that Uncle Sam is a little bit slower when it comes to adopting things. Coming from somebody that spent 6 years in the Air National Guard, I definitely understand that sometimes the government is a little bit slower to adopt things. But at this point, I think that these tools have been in the business world for so long at such high capacity that there is no excuse left on the board as to why the judicial system shouldn't be using something like this.
Not only in Ohio, but also around the country. And Jan, also, I think, from a conservative Republican perspective, even it makes sense to invest in data right now because literally, like what we're doing potentially with mass incarceration creep is making our country less competitive globally. And literally, like that is not something that we can just sit back where other countries don't incarcerate. They really don't, at least in the way that we do, numbers of people without data, or at least they do it, the free countries don't. And what we need to be able to do is to make sure that we remain competitive. When we've got people warehoused for years and years, hopefully long, or in certain cases, longer than they may need to be if we had data, that makes our country less competitive. That makes Ohio less competitive. That makes Cuyahoga County less competitive. Where right now, employers are looking to train ex-felons even because, like, literally, there's so many jobs that need to be filled. And
Well, and you said it costs what, like $20,000 a year to incarcerate. There's no way that I would ever make a business decision that equates to $20,000 without data-backed insights. And from somebody, I have very limited experience running a company. Obviously, we're running a startup. We're doing decent for right now, knock on wood. But there's nowhere in my brain that any rational business owner would ever make a decision to the tune of 20 grand without data at this point. So it's mind boggling that we're making decisions on people's livelihoods and then also taxpayer dollars to the tune of $20,000 without data backed insights.
and there are 50,000 people right now. That's the size of Lakewood, Ohio, or Euclid, Ohio, I believe. The entire every man, woman, and child is incarcerated in Ohio. There's 50,000 people incarcerated.
It's
So that's 50,000 times 20,000, and 20,000 is their minimum. So that's whatever that number is in terms of a cost annually. That literally, like as I've used before, it's the creep that we need to be concerned about because certainly no one is trying to say that people are innocent or not innocent, but rather it's when we might be without because of lack of data, our costs go up, our inefficiency goes up. Judges don't have the data. They may say like 5 years when it could be probation. Well, like 5 years at $20,000 a year. If most of the judges are doing probation in your county, and you've just given somebody 5 years, you made up, like you said, on $100,000 decision that, like, literally doesn't always measure up because we don't have the data.
Right. And you said, well, 50,000 and 20,000, that's $1 billion just for everybody's reference.
Oh dear Lord.
well, and it's why it said um, it comes down to fiscal responsibility, right? Both as taxpayers and the government. It comes down to fairness, right? Making sure that person A is being treated the same as person B and person C, and et cetera. And then and then then try to take out this sort of implicit bias or explicit bias or even the racism in our systems. And so I think the cost of not having this data is huge, and it's not so much the I'll call it the sentencing data, Ray. You can take it to the next step. You can do the back end analysis, right? So I think you have a great example. If person A commits a crime and is guilty, but the but the data suggests that probation is the right thing, then you can put them on probation and you can track them. You can track whether or not they repeat or something happens, right? Or do they reform and move on and become productive members of society? Or you can stick that person into 5 years of incarceration and then track them on the back end and see what happens when they come out after 5 years. And then you can start to make these, you know, in my world as a consultant, it's very simple. We collect data, we document facts and findings, which are very binary, they're true or false. We draw upon those facts and findings, we draw conclusions, and from
Mhm.
those conclusions we make recommendations. So I can see this not only in the front end to help you guys as judges on being fair and equitable, but also on the back end to make sure that what you're doing is actually accomplishing the goal of helping people become. I mean, I think the goal is still to get people to come back into society as productive members, right? And I think you make a great point on this isn't about guilty or not guilty, right? The justice system, I think, does a good job of determining whether or not you're guilty or not. It's what you do once you're determined to be guilty, and how do you treat people fair, and how do you have some fiscal responsibility to, I mean, again, you always follow the money in these situations, unfortunately. But if we can be more fiscally responsible, then we can spend that money on something that maybe can help others, as well, or the same people. Instead of incarcerating them, we can send them back to school or give them some training, or you
Well, and
know
that's, yeah, John, to your point, that's what I was just thinking in my head. I'm like, if it costs $20,000 a year to incarcerate somebody, what are the alternate costs, right? The alternatives. But that $20,000 a year, what if, and this is, some nirvana, but what if rather than um, an imprisonment, you have like a probationary period, and then some of that money is allocated to an educational program or a trades program to help that person get a job, or so that's they're a crisis team that's assigned to different people. Or there's a lot of stuff that you can do with $1 billion. I mean, when when he just said those numbers, I was like, holy crap! There's all of these different things you could implement.
Jan, that's $1 billion a year.
Right. Oh, a year. Okay.
Yeah, that's $1 billion a year. Like I said, that's where the mass incarceration. If it's eight, like people who every year, collectively in Ohio, with 50,000 people, at $20,000 a person, that's $1 billion for every year of incarceration. So every time there's a decision made by a judge, and I think I'm one of the first judges who raised the issue of cost. Again, a lot of it comes down to what we started to talk about at the beginning, where maybe I approach problems differently as a result of being kind of plucked out of the inner city of Cleveland 50 years ago,
Mm.
and now being in a position where I can state things with a level of authority, because I have gone to the best schools in the United States of America, and maybe look at things and say things that are, reflective of the diversity of where I've come from, both from the inner city as well as from, basically the Honey Valley and Shaker Heights in Ohio, which are very wealthy places.
And I think this is a perfect time. And sorry, John, but this transition, right? We were talking about financial responsibility right now, but the other part that I'm extremely interested about you touching on, Ray, is the social effect, the social costs, right, of mass incarceration. So why don't we talk a little bit about the social costs, not just the financial? I know the $1 billion is a big number, and that catches everybody's eyes. But what I'm, when me and John talk about, he's over here, whoop, up this way. When me and John talk about like empathetic connection and understanding where somebody is coming from, that's what I'm really feeling right now is what is those social costs that come with mass incarceration.
No doubt about it. And I think again, that's kind of like the unique perspective of me coming from Cleveland and the inner city, and kind of knowing, uh, you know, where people are. I mean, and oftentimes, what's hard is that when you're uh, uh, not a person who is in of that empathetic nature like you, it's easy just to live your life and not be concerned about other people. And so when you look at like families, for example, in inner city areas, uh, uh, it's been decimation because black males are incarcerated. I mean, literally, families are, everyone talks about the welfare queens, but, like, how can you have families when men aren't there? They're incarcerated for whatever reason. And like I said, no one's trying to, make it easy for criminals. But what we want to be able to do is make our system fair. And hopefully, if our system is fair, then what the other thing that's a real problem right now in 2020 is the lack of confidence and faith in our judicial system. And you have mothers seeing their children, like go into like the criminal justice system as soon as they become teenagers. You get like a decimation of communities that are already at the place where they're in danger of breaking the fabric of middle class values and or never even achieve that because that's ultimately the place where you have confidence that you're going to be able to be an American and America is great and all of those things of that nature. And that's what I was taught 50 years ago when there were middle class values and, hard work, the whole 9 yards. What I'm afraid of and what needs to be addressed from a disruptive standpoint right now is that the differences in those who are uh, quote unquote, not just racially integrated like the leaders did 50 years ago, but economically integrated, socially integrated, who have the same values as everybody else, that there is a disruption that needs to occur right there because so many people, and I walk in my old community all the time, uh, are without that. And you can see it in the nature of where like people were surprised by the violence and the riots and things of that nature surrounding really something that, and when you think about it, and I've shared John with a couple of U.S. guys. I mean, in a way, our justice system missed it. I mean, the claim of places where there was unnecessary violence by police was something that had not necessarily been addressed as clearly. And so when the violence occurred, just it was not necessarily as spontaneous as you thought, but it was reflective of the social places where people were, where the lack of being able to have a voice, as well as the ability to have people listen to that voice, I think is something that we need to really address and is beginning to be addressed in the 2020s area. Hopefully, without the violence anymore. Obviously, that was not the excuse, but and not the way to go. But people shouldn't be surprised, though, that because what I'm really trying to do as a judge is to make sure that that stuff is addressed fairly and equally, and it begins with something like the database. I think because people need to hear that we're caring and that we're concerned, and that there is if there's a problem, we want to have the data to address it.
I there was a lot of there's a lot of pent up demand, I think, that again shook up the snow globe, which it was not pleasant, but it was probably necessary. We've had this great discussion, Ray, and you've brought up some really great points just about how long it's been around and some of the problems that you're trying to fix and how you disrupt this sort of status quo within the judicial system. So as we wrap up, I mean, the devil's in the details in these things, right? So we've identified the problems, we've sort of empathized with your constituents and the stakeholders, and it's like, what do we do? How do you vision going forward? What are the next steps? Those kind of things. So and then we can wrap up this podcast.
Importance of now, it can't be underestimated. Again, that's why I wanted to use to use Jan's term, inflammatory language, because it's so easy for this issue to continue. I mean, like uh, uh, Blue Ribbon Task Force, hundreds of $1,000s spent on like documents over the last 25 years. saying that data is needed, and yet nothing has been done. There is a reason why that hasn't occurred. And what we need to make sure is that, like, whatever we do right now, because this is a moment in time where the momentum is out there and it is on the side of justice and fairness and rightness, that has to be done. I've been a leader on it. I want other people to join in the leader. That's why I'm on this podcast. Also, like, I'm up for election, and I want to make sure that people vote to retain Judge Ray Headen, because, like, that stuff is meaningful when you get somebody who's interested in disrupting the status quo. Thank you.
What,
I think you might be muted there, John.
besides voting for you, Ray, which hopefully everybody listening to this will, what can the average Joe citizen do within the state of Ohio to help your cause, help you get the disruptive, move this thing forward, right? How do we, I hate it. We see this in business all the time where people analyze and analyze, and then unfortunately status quo wins the deal. How do we get it so that status quo doesn't win and we actually make progress, we move forward and solve some of these problems?
Well, the database is a legislative effort, so it needs to be enacted into law. It is the Ohio General Assembly and the governor will see legislation in 2021 to enact the beginnings of the criminal sentencing database. So when you vote, you make sure you also contact your legislators to make sure that they know that, like, this is silly not to have data in the 21st century in the measurement of and the performance of our judicial system. Use the words that are inflammatory because, like, that's the only way it will make sure that, like, it will not be trampled down by whatever institutional whatever is kept it from happening before. Inflammation, to use Jan's word. Don't mince your words. Get out there and fight. The Cleveland Clergy Coalition on my website, www.judgerayheaden.com, has started a change.org petition. Sign it. Go to my website, www.rayheaden.com, judgerayheaden.com or rayheaden.com, either way. Sign the virtual petition to the governor and the Ohio General Assembly to enact what is common sense, the criminal sentencing database. So those are tangible steps right now that can be taken by anyone. Be aggressive, be out there, don't be silent, because it has proven over 25 years the silence will just let the status quo continue. Sign the petition on my website, vote for Judge Ray Headen.
I love it. All right. Well, I appreciate everybody taking the time to tune in today. John, I don't know if you have anything else that you wanted to add, but I feel that, there's a lot of eyebrow moments and a lot of light bulb moments throughout this entire episode. So this is why I'm really excited that the Disruptor is a thing. There's all of these amazing people out there doing these disruptive things, shaking the snow globe, trying to really improve the quality of life of everybody involved in all of these processes, right? Nobody ever comes into these positions being an innovative disruptor with the intention of, like, okay, I'm going to try to shake this snow globe just so I can take it and look at the beauty for a split second and then smash it on a brick. I mean, generally they come in, they shake the snow globe and just watch all of the beauty that comes out of that disruption. And there's a lot of things that stand in the way of that snow globe getting shaken. So, Judge, I really admire, this battle that you've been fighting for years. I mean, getting to the point, and when I was going back through and I was listening about the life story and everything like that, one thing that really stood out to me just now is you said, you still go and you walk around your old neighborhood and really stay in touch with that piece. There's this quote from a poem called If by Rudyard Kipling, right? And I read this poem every morning, and it really stuck out to me when you said that. And it says, if you can walk with kings, but maintain the common touch. And the entire poem is about how you can really become a man and stand on your own 2 feet and live your life with character and live your life with integrity and with values. And that statement right there solidifies Ivy League schools, the ability to be a great, person in law, being appointed to a judicial seat, but walking with kings and maintaining the common touch. So if there's any other pathway outside of financial responsibility, innovative ability, or anything else, if there's no other reason that you try to, if you live in Cuyahoga County and there's no other reason that you want to vote for Ray, outside of any of those other reasons, let it be, because he has not lost that common touch. And I think that that is extremely important when it comes to somebody sitting in that seat. So,
God bless you. Thank you. I really mean that.
yeah. And John, I'll let you wrap up.
Well, I just want to say, actually, that those are really inspiring. That poem is inspiring, and I think Ray does fit that bill. I want to just say, Ray, thanks for coming on our show. Jan, thanks for hosting us and having us have the faith in us trying to build this theme out of the Disruptor series. And I wish you all the best of luck, Ray. And I'm glad you're my friend. And we'll keep disrupting and we'll keep moving forward, buddy. Thanks.
Same. Thank you.
All
Thank you
right.
both.
Goodbye, everybody. See you on the next one.